Yeah, you're good.
Do you ever ask for the sale? They say like, when you're in a business meeting, you're supposed to ask for the sale.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what that was.
That's what I was asking.
Put it on a little bit.
And you delivered. Well, folks, we are, as Patrick mentioned, this is our last show of the semester. We saved the best for last, so just to get you going. We're really excited to be here. We're part of the Hustling Sideways podcast. Myself and Alan Halas. I'm a keynote motivational speaker. Alan's a music writer. We've been doing this show for about 3.5 and maybe even over 4 years at this point. About people who have passions beyond 9 to 5. So anybody can do a job, but to do several of them, to really have passions that just go beyond like the workday. And we've interviewed alumni, people all over the world, and so we're really thankful for the 707 Hub for sponsoring us and to be here and be with all of you. So thank you all for coming, and we have a very special guest.
Yes, absolutely. Jen, welcome. Jen Lada, from Good Karma Brands,
ESPN Milwaukee, Good Karma Brands,
and College GameDay as well. So welcome to the Hustling Sideways podcast. Marquette alum as well. Tell us a little bit about kind of your backstory. For those that don't know, what kind of brought you to Marquette initially?
Okay, so I grew up in Northern Illinois, not too far from here. My family still lives there actually, and I was only allowed to apply to 3 schools.
Okay.
So money was tight, and applications are expensive, and my parents were like, look, you need one state school, you need one safe school that we know you're going to get into, and then kind of like, where do you want to go? And I had gone to a visit to Marquette in the winter of my junior or senior year, I don't even remember at this point, and we toured the campus, and we looked at the dorms, and we saw the College of Communications, because I thought I would be interested in broadcasting at the time, and campus was pretty dead, and I was like, I don't know, man, this place is ugh. And they said, well, it's dead because there's a basketball game going on. And I was like, oh, well, where is that?
Right.
And they said, oh, it's down at the Bradley Center, it's a few blocks down that way, but if you guys go over there, maybe they'll let you in. And I said, all right, well, and my mom, who is like the most, I don't want to say passive, but she's just not like an assertive person. She kind of just goes with the flow, was like, let's go. And I was like, let's go. And so we got in the car, drove down to the Bradley Center, found parking. Of course, the game was going on. We didn't have tickets. But my mom basically said to them, like, my daughter's interested in attending Marquette. She was told, this is the place to be. This is the scene. And so they were like, yeah, you guys can go in. I'm pretty sure it was second half. I'm pretty sure they were like, you're not going to see a lot. But I saw a lot. And it was an electric atmosphere. This is Conference USA days. Marquette, I think Mike Dean was the basketball coach at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it was wild. And the band is boom, 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 and the cheerleaders are performing, and the crowd's going crazy, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And I really think that was the selling point for me for Marquette. I was like, okay, I'm a sports fan. I grew up in an athletic household. My dad was our cross-country and track coach in high school, and I always loved sports. I grew up, like I said, in Northern Illinois in the 90s, so Michael Jordan, the Bulls, three-peat, like that was all a big part of my youth, like some of my core memories. And so that was really the thing that did it, was, oh my gosh, this is a cool sports thing, and I want to be a part of this. And when I got accepted to Marquette, all of the other schools that I had gotten into, it was like, no, this is it. I think my parents also loved that it was so close to home. Like, if they wanted to just drive up on a random Tuesday, they could, and they did.
I was going to say, I'm sure you love that.
Who is this? Don't worry about him, he'll be gone.
I'm sure that they love that. So the game day atmosphere, of course, being part of it. You said you played sports growing up and cross country. Anything else?
I was ran cross country and track, and I did cheerleading and dance. It seems like an entirely different, universe to say this, but there were not a lot of girls' sports in my hometown. The first exposure to sports a lot of people my age had was like 5th grade volleyball, 5th grade basketball. In 2025, if you started playing sports in 5th grade, you're not playing. You're sitting on the bench watching everyone else play sports. So, I'm so glad that has changed. I'm so glad there's so many more opportunities for young ladies. But my dad ran in college. And so it always seemed like something he had a vested interest in, and so we all followed suit and we all ran. My sister and brothers ran in college. When I got to Marquette, he asked me, he's like, do you want to run? And I was like, not even a little bit. Like, I was so burnt out at that point. I did try out for the crew team and went through the first week of tryouts and was doing really well. And then I saw a sign for cheerleading tryouts, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go do that. And so I was a cheerleader here at Marquette for 4 years.
Oh wow, awesome. Now, of course, broadcasting comes into the picture. When did you get the itch to say, like, okay, I want to be around the game like that and be, be a presenter? Because it's a very public-facing thing. Obviously, cheerleading is too. You're in front of the crowd. But when were you like, I can cover games and I can be still a part of the game day atmosphere that way?
Yeah. So, can you guys hear me? Okay? Is this microphone? Yes. Check.
Yes.
Check. Great. Okay. Great. Because I can shout. I was a cheerleader. So, I always say it's interesting how when you look back, you see the breadcrumbs that led to your path. So when I was really young, my parents had me lecturing in church. So on Sunday, I'm like in 5th grade, I'm up there and I'm reading from the good book at church on Sundays. And I was in plays and doing all of these like front-facing things. I was in pageants when I was in high school. And it never occurred to me that all of those things would sort of come together and lead to a career where I was presenting myself in front of people. So I think I had a head start in getting over those nerves, getting over that confidence issue that some people might deal with when they get to school. But the reality was I didn't know that women could be sportscasters because there just weren't that many of them doing it on the local or national level. But I was right across the hall at Johnston Hall, and I was sitting in a broadcasting class and thinking I was going to be, the next Barbara Walters or Connie Chung. And the guys who were sitting behind me were talking about the basketball game. And, coincidentally, I had been dating a guy on the basketball team, dated him for a really long time, 4 years. So I knew about a lot of like the ins and outs and details of what was going on with the team, sort of the inner workings, right, as one does when they're around the players as often as I was. And whatever they were saying, I was like, that is not what's going on. And, I just turned around and was like, you guys do not know what you're talking about. Like, you're cool hypothesis, but that's not what's happening. And we ended up getting into a conversation about the basketball team. And one of the guys said, have you ever thought about doing sports? And it was like this light bulb moment for me where I was like, I actually have never thought about being a sportscaster because I didn't think that was a thing. And so I remember going up to Dr. Halas's office on like the 4th floor at Johnston Hall and asking him, can women be sportscasters? And he was like, well, yeah. And he pulled up a list of sportscasters who were women, Robin Roberts was at the front of that field, Leslie Visser was at the front, but like it was really, I couldn't, come up with them the way that you can now. And I was like, I wonder, can I do this? And he said, why don't you go do an internship at one of the local television stations and see, how it feels if you like it. And I never looked back. I remember interning at WISN, which was right down the street here. I did an internship at ESPN Milwaukee. Well, it was 620 WTMJ because they were the home of the Bucks. They still are, obviously, in some capacity. And I did the NBA hotline, and that was just cutting up highlights. It was cutting up Bucks highlights, and then they would send them off to all of the affiliates so that when they were doing their morning sports, and they would talk about, and Sam Cassell with a big 3, they would say, they were up, whatever, Bucks were up 71-68 when Sam Cassell went to the corner, and then they played the clip. And so it was like, okay, I enjoy this, I love this. But it was still a tough row to hoe. I remember one professor, I'll never forget, at Marquette, who told me that I should stick to news because women weren't any good at talking about sports. This was a female professor at Marquette in the College of Communications who tried to discourage me from chasing a job in sports. And that was my first indication of like, not everyone is going to be super pumped for you to like take this opportunity, to chase this dream.
Yeah, and that's so interesting, the dichotomy of like the conversation you had with that one dude who was like, you should get in sports, and then a female professor telling you not to. It's almost like the antonym of what you would expect. How did you take that would probably shatter a little bit. Did it alter your confidence, or are you take that and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna prove it wrong? No.
Yeah, I don't remember it altering my confidence at all. And the older I get, and I have 3 children now, and they all have varying levels of confidence, right? Like I could ask each of them to go talk in front of a crowd, and they would have varying levels of success. I don't know, other than my dad instilling in me just you can do anything, and I've always been confident, and I recognize the older I get that's a luxury. That's not something that everybody has benefited from. So I recognize that the more I pour into my kids, maybe they will be comfortable walking into a room and presenting themselves to strangers, because as I've learned in my 44 years on this planet, that does not come naturally to most people. But to your point, so when that professor said that, no, I don't remember being discouraged. I remember just being like, she doesn't know. She doesn't know.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well, we talk about, on this podcast, normally we're talking to entrepreneurs and people that start businesses, and sometimes there's that little bit of a chip on the shoulder when you have that person that tells you no, you can't do this, or you're not, realistically, for them, if it's having a business idea that doesn't go there, that's a motivator. I could see where that would totally be a motivator for you to be well, okay, like you said, she doesn't know. She doesn't know that I'm capable of this, and do you feel like you found your work ethic go up, it increased from that moment where all of a sudden you had more of a desire to file a story faster or get something done, as perfect as it could be?
So it's interesting again, the benefit of hindsight. When I was younger, people would ask me to describe myself. I'd always be like, I'm a perfectionist. And I always thought that I was saying which means I'm going to do such a good job and I'm going to impress everyone in the room. And then I realized as I got older, perfectionism is actually a trauma response. And so I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And it was this idea of not feeling like you were good enough, so needing to be more, or needing to earn love, or needing to earn the respect of people in the room, and seeking external validation. And I was like, oh, well, we don't want to do that anymore. So that was just it was reframing and rewiring. I always want to do a good job. I always want to put my best foot forward. I always want to make the client or teacher or boss happy and feel like they made a good decision by putting me in charge of that project. But I'm also, as I've gotten older, so much more willing to make mistakes. When I was younger, saying I don't know, if somebody was like, who's the all-time leading scorer for the Milwaukee Bucks, and you were like, I felt like that was some indictment of me and my ability to do the job, or my value. And as I've gotten older, I realized that the better answer to that is, I don't know. But let me find out. And that idea of, I don't have all the answers, but what I have is a willingness to find it. And I feel like that goes so much further than pretending to know everything, or pretending you have all the answers, and then feeling like you're walking through life with imposter syndrome. So that was a huge, I don't even know when it happened in my career, but that was a huge weight lifted off my shoulder of I don't have to be perfect, I just have to be me, and me is enough.
Totally.
I have enough proof, I have enough evidence that shows that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's, people don't relate to perfect, they relate to authentic. And that's what you bring, right? And that's and I know we'll talk about brand in a second, but I think that's such a good lesson, is you may feel pressure no matter what field you're going into, that you have to do that thing, and it's got to be fantastic, and you're going to make mistakes because you're human. That's what happens, and you'd rather own up to them and be like, that's great. I like to make fun of myself a lot, that's just kind of what I do, but that's me, that's authentic, and I'm very comfortable in that, and that takes some practice to get there, and I think I think you've perfected that, which is what I meant to say. Yeah, here we are. That's a really good call.
Let's talk a little bit about building a brand and establishing a presence, because that is something now that in media, I'm sure, you're a creator as well, whether you like it or not, right? Everybody has a personal brand, everybody has their own personal identity and what they want to have out there about themselves. How conscious are you of that when you're putting things out, I guess, in social media, or when you're putting out a segment or something like that, to have your own kind of stamp on it?
So there's a couple of different ways that I can attack this inquiry. So I do two very similar but different jobs. On the radio, Monday through Friday, here on ESPN Milwaukee, we are talking local sports, we are goofy, we are irreverent, we are mischievous, and that's the most authentic version of my personality. That's just who I've always been. I like to have fun, I take my job seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously, and the radio is like the vessel where I can be my most authentic self. But it is, to use your guys' vernacular, it's a side hustle. And doing the radio is a side hustle. My big job, my main job is I'm a reporter and a host for ESPN. And the job that I have been given at ESPN is a features reporter. And many times the stories I do for College GameDay, for E60, for SC Featured are heavy. And they require a gentle touch. And so I have to almost like take out one file card and replace it with another file card to do these two very different jobs. But I want to do them both really, really well. So from an authenticity standpoint, the radio is the most authentic version of me. The reporting is the most professional version of me. And because I am oftentimes talking to people rather, about their traumas or their challenges or their adversity, that requires a delicate touch, that requires a heightened level of empathy, that requires compassion. I'm not saying I don't have those things, but when I'm talking about, the Brewers starting the season to the Yankees in that series, there's not a lot of compassion during that conversation. It's more of like, what the hell, guys? So, from a branding standpoint, I am conscious of how one influences the other. I don't want anything I say on the radio to then make someone hesitant to have me come into their living room and talk about their pain. So that is something that constantly weighs on me. Not so much that I am not showing up for my radio job in a way that is still fulfilling, but I'm also is this something that would make my other job, my main job, my big job, would this make it more difficult for me? And the truth of the matter is, several years ago I was presented with a situation where it did. I was doing a story, a serious story, a family that had recently lost a son in a very traumatic way, and the death was still very fresh and the pain was still very raw. And I come into the house, kind of carrying myself the way that I always do, which is high energy and, a little bit boisterous, and that was immediately ew. And, I had to have my producer pull me aside and be like, hey, you read this way wrong. And I had ended up writing an apology letter, and every year on the anniversary of that young man's death, I send a chunk of money to his charity, not to hey, here's some hush money, don't tell me what happened. But just to show I did make a mistake in that situation. I should have recognized the situation for what it was, and I think about you guys every year, and here's, a donation to the charity in his memory type of thing. But again, I made the mistake, right? And I was somebody had to be hey, no, for me to recognize how that sort of works. So I hope that's a long-winded way of talking about the branding and the authenticity and showing up, but it's just, I guess, being more aware of what each situation requires and demands.
Totally. I think it's a testament. I mean, the confidence you have and the accountability you have to know that's a difficult situation. I think some people be you know what, that's me, and I don't really care. There could be a level of I'll move on. But the fact that you cared so much about that, and that you've taken it upon yourself to deliver something each year that's meaningful, I think goes to your branding. That's who you are. And I do think it's kind of interesting. a lot of people we talk to, like with side hustles, it's almost like the radio is like an outlet for you, where you're like this is me at like a bar talking to my friends, and just like, and like that's why you're so good at it. Like that's a passion, that's where it comes out, and I battle this a lot, where like, do you keep your side hustle sort of away from your normal crowd? And like you can't, because you're public facing, that's what it is. And some people like have that side hustle, and it is what it is, and then have their professional life, and it is what it is, and are able to sort of navigate that. About 6 years ago, I decided to put them together, and I'm really happy I did, because like I was able, people at work know what I do inside, and vice versa. And I'm like, it was almost like a breath of fresh air, like I don't have to hide that anymore, you know? And
They weight off the shoulders.
yeah, right, in that sense. But I have the outlet where I can like go be goofy in front of a bunch of high school students, and I have the non-outlet where I'm a professional and I direct global solutions, you know? So
Well, and I think it's such a great point by you, because human beings are multifaceted.
Totally.
We are multidimensional. Like, I don't want to be defined exclusively as a sportscaster, or as a mom, or as a wife, or, you know, like, all of those things are true, but they all coexist.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think that in our industry specifically, and sometimes our bosses are really guilty of this, they pigeonhole you in a role, and they see you as something, and then you never escape that cloak. It's like, oh, well, aren't you a reporter? Yes, but I can also host. Yes, but I can also do this. Oh, but I'm also a features reporter. Oh, but I'm also a radio host. Like, and that's just in the communication space. Like, I pride myself on being multifaceted, and I tell my kids that all the time. Like, just because you've been defined as one thing during this chapter, during this phase, doesn't mean that tomorrow you can't reinvent yourself as something else. You know, don't ever feel so like you're in a straitjacket of, well, I'm only known as this. I can't break out of this. You know, I'll never be seen as anything but this.
Yeah. That actually, let's speak to that a little bit too, because you're looking at 3 products of the Marquette Communications College, especially digital media for both of us. I know that, you know, my job was not just shooting videos. Like, I thought initially that I would be just behind the camera entirely, totally. And then we were talking about this just before this. There's so much that is shooting your own thing, which means you're standing up and doing your own piece, and you're learning to edit, and you're learning to write, and you're learning to do all that. How much learning on the job did you have to do of like saying yes to things where you had to say, okay, well, I need to learn this facet of this, and maybe not perfect it, but like just be able to be like kind of a Swiss Army knife when you first started out in broadcasting?
Okay, so I learned so much on the job. And that is not a knock on my Marquette education. It's just that the business and the industry evolved so quickly.
Yep.
You know, we were joking about the size of our cameras that we were lugging around when we were shooting stories and shooting stand-ups, and now how you can literally shoot a story like that camera over there. It like fits in my pocket, you know. And so technology changed, you know. Back in the Stone Age, when I was first editing, you know, you were reel to reel, and then it was like that. I remember when Avid and digital editing went into the newsroom. We all had to have a tutorial on that, and you know, now my son is editing videos on Snapchat and TikTok, and like, and he's doing it right there on his phone, and they look professional level. Like, so yeah, I had to learn a lot of like that type of stuff on the job. I also had to learn how important everyone's job is. You know, like a newscast doesn't get on the air just because an anchor sits behind a desk and reads the prompter. You know, there's so many other, and similarly with College GameDay, I think that was, I've been on the show now for 10 years, the number of people responsible for getting that show on the air every Saturday morning is in the hundreds. You know, you may see the 10 of us, you know, on the set every Saturday morning, but we are talking about you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of units that get that show off the ground. So that's what I learned as well. Like, just because I was a television personality and I thought I was like so important, didn't make me any more important than all of the other people who got that picture, you know, on the satellite and down to the television. So, you know, that was a humbling, you know, moment. Again, we're talking about going into the world and being confident, having to sell yourself and having to present yourself, but then also realize, like, I can't do this by myself, you know? So that was a huge lesson for me early on in the broadcasting space.
Sure, definitely. Right out of college, were you at you said Channel 12, Channel 6 for a while, Fox 6, right? And then ESPN happens. What was kind of the indicator for you that like my next career move, like this is an opportunity? And knowing when was the right time to, take the risk and jump into that new opportunity? Because there are levels to it, right? We are in the top 35 media market, I think, in the country, but to jump to something that is national and that takes a lot of confidence. It takes a lot of, for lack of a better term, just a lot of risk involved.
Balls, were you looking for?
That's what I was.
He was trying to say balls for
yeah,
sure.
that's where I was going with it.
We talked about Sam Cassell earlier, it's only fair.
Yeah.
God, that's such an old joke. Is there anyone in here that even gets the Sam Cassell joke?
Somebody here,
Yeah, there
somebody
is.
here told me.
Thank you for being
Somebody
here.
here told me before this that they were 1 year old when the iPhone came out, so I don't think so.
That was you. You can reach.
Sorry to put you on blast.
Look it up online, Sam Cassell. So I did internships at Channel 12, I did an internship at 620. As soon as I left Marquette, my resume reel was shit. It was so bad. And that was not an indictment again of Marquette, it was just like, I didn't really know what television stations wanted. So I got really lucky. Preps Plus, which was a television show here in Milwaukee, run by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, was looking for a reporter. And again, having that like overdeveloped sense of confidence, I was like, I could do that. Well, they were looking for like a real reporter, like someone with experience in the sports space. But they sort of took mercy on me and said, hey, if you want to come here in a non-paid internship position, we'll teach you, some of the stuff. You'll go out on stories, you'll shoot hockey games, you'll shoot basketball games, you'll shoot swimming meets, and you'll do football every Friday night. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm working at a restaurant downtown, Joey Bonus, RIP, it's not there anymore now, it's a hotel. And I was like, I'll just take Fridays off of the restaurant, and I'll do this non-paid internship for a year. And I got so much better in that calendar. It wasn't even a calendar, it was a school year. And when I left that non-paid position after 1 year, I had a really good resume reel. Because the show was pre-produced. So if I flubbed on a stand-up, guess what? I did it again. And if I flubbed, I did it again. And then I did it again. And then I put the very best stuff from that year on this resume reel. So I send this out to all corners of the country, and I got a hit in San Diego, California. And I was like, oh, damn.
Something.
I'm gonna go to San Diego. So I went to San Diego, I did the job interview, I've talked about this publicly, I've discussed this at length, but was there by myself, I was 22 years old, and the sports director was inappropriate with me for the duration of the interview. He undressed in front of me, he got drunk after doing the 6 o'clock sportscast, he brought me back to his home after the 11 o'clock sportscast. This is pre-Uber, this is pre-iPhones, I don't have Google Maps, I am a 22-year-old girl all by myself in San Diego, California. And the only thing I think that really helped my cause is I didn't get out of the car. I refused to get out of the car. I was like, please take me back to my hotel. He did, then he threatened me and said, if you ever tell anyone what happened tonight, you'll never work a day in this industry. And I was like, cool, cool, cool. I'm never coming back. Don't worry, not coming to San Diego. And I was super enlightened to a reality of being a woman and a young woman in the sports broadcasting space. And I came home and told my parents, and my dad was like, I'll kill him. I was like, sure, little dad, thanks, I appreciate it. But I remember I was living on the east side, and I'm working at the restaurant still, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that sucked. And I'm riding my bike around town, just sort of trying to clear my head, and I got a call from Rockford, Illinois, WREX in Rockford. And they were looking for a weekend sportscaster, and so they said, can you come down next week for an interview? And I went to Rockford, and I got that job, and I was there for 2 years. And then they promoted me to a main anchor, and I was like, hot dog, we have weekends off, this is gonna be great. And I hated it. I hated every ounce of talking about board meetings, and talking about referendums, and talking about murder, and I was like, this is not for me. So I got a call from Fox 6 here in Milwaukee, and coincidentally, they had seen me at the Packers playoff game Packers Seahawks playoff game. We want the ball and we're going to score.
I remember that. We all remember
And
that.
I
Instant
begged my boss in Rockford to let me shoot the game because we were a state line station that covered the Bears and the Packers. And they had seen me there shooting the game and they had an opening and they wanted a woman. And they said, can you come and interview for this job? And I said, yes, and I got that job. And I was there for 7 years. And I saw colleagues of mine who were leaving for bigger markets. And I was like, I think I'm good enough to go somewhere else. I think I might be able to do this. And there was an opening in Chicago. And I'm from Northern Illinois. And I'm a huge Bulls fan and a Cubs fan and all of those things. And I thought, man, the opportunity to cover the teams I grew up rooting for and the chance for my parents to watch me every night on the regional sports network, that would really be something. And I went down there and I got a job as a part-time freelancer. And I was there for 6 months and they gave me a full-time job. And then I was there for 2 years and I got the offer from ESPN. And I cried. Not because I was happy, because I was terrified.
Okay.
Because I was like,
Yeah.
That's very understandable, I think.
Jen, you have got it so good. You live in Chicago. Your parents are an hour away. You are covering the teams that you cheer for your entire childhood. Why do you need to go to ESPN? It doesn't validate your talent. It doesn't validate your career. You won't wake up at 90 years old and be like, I wish I had worked at ESPN. But I remember my dad telling me, like, go. If it sucks, you come back. You know, like you can always, you're from here. They'll give you a job if you want to work here again. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
And then I've been there for 10 years.
It's almost like the anti-pep talk. Like go and don't worry, you know? Like it's kind of like, it almost like unleashes you from like if this doesn't work out, you'll still come back. So like, why not? Why not try it? And yeah, that's great. That's good parenting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Looking at ESPN and that, like you said, hundreds of people being involved in College GameDay and doing this on a week-to-week basis, what does your season look like? As far as like, I'm sure it's very hectic. You know, how often do you know like where you're going? You know, a month in advance, or do you never? You're just week to week, right?
Are you familiar with bowl season?
Yeah.
I know where the national championship game is.
Okay.
So game day is such an interesting dynamic because we don't know where we're going until the Saturday night or Sunday before we're there. So it's wholly dependent on who won and what the storylines are and what the standings are and what the college football rankings look like and have we ever been there before? You know, like all of these things. It's like this incredible algorithm that like has no definitive, you know, equation. So I will never forget when I got asked to be on game day because I was hired at ESPN to join Colin Cowherd for our radio show. And he was looking for a co-host, and I went and met with him, and we hit it off great. And of course, I was like ball busting, and he loved that. And he was like, this is going to be such a cool dynamic. And then he left for Fox. And I had signed a deal thinking like, this is happening.
You're going to be on the studio show.
So I said to ESPN, I said, look, no harm, no foul, I'll go back to Chicago. Like, they haven't even put anybody in.
My dad told me I could come back
My dad
there.
said I could come back.
Can I call my dad?
And they were like, no, we're gonna find something for you. And it took 6 months before they literally found something for me. Like, I thought I was on my way out. I thought they were gonna fire me. I was at that, like, don't call us, we'll call you stage. And I said, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired from ESPN. Like, this is crazy. And I knocked on every door, I talked to every manager, I said, I have, you know, this many years of experience in sports broadcasting, I'm sure we can find something for me to do. And I had done a couple of features, just again, filling time, and I get a call from the gentleman who was overseeing game day at the time, and he says, I want you to join College GameDay. And I was like, awesome. And he goes, College GameDay. And I was like, yeah, it's great. And he's like, it's our #1 show. And I was like, well, thanks for having me.
I appreciate that.
Yes, of course I'm supposed to be here. Right, totally.
He's like, you have no idea. I was like, not really. But I was from Northern Illinois. I had worked worked in Milwaukee, I worked in Chicago. They're not exactly hotbeds of college football, you guys.
Yeah.
Like, so I was totally naive to the phenomenon of tradition and rivalries and the pageantry and the insanity of college football. And it was like a year or two later, I popped into his office and I was like, hey.
I get it.
Now I understand why you were like, are you feeling okay? Like, do you recognize the opportunity that we are giving you here? And it's remarkable, it's fantastic. I always say College GameDay is the very, very best people at each of the jobs. Reese Davis is the best host I have ever worked with. Kirk Herbstreit is the best analyst I have ever worked with. Pat McAfee is the best entertainer I have ever worked with. And it goes down the line, position by position, director, producer, everyone is exceptional. And every once in a while I have to remind myself that I'm not there by accident. Like, I am exceptional at my job too, because we can get overwhelmed with like, Pat McAfee,
I'm here with them.
And then you're like, wait a minute, no, I'm really good at my job. Like, so I belong here.
Yeah, that's huge. Well, I'm curious, like, I can imagine, like, you're so used to this now, but a lot of folks just get like awestruck, by being with athletes, or like are they? Because you're so authentic and down to earth. Do you get a level of comfortability where they're like able to share these really vulnerable and stories that are really personal? Like does it take a while to get them in a space where they're like comfortable doing it, or does that happen quick for you, or how does that process work when you're trying to tell a story?
So given the time constraints of game day, and I know we didn't really touch on that last time, but like I don't have time to like work my way up to trust. I have the benefit of my reputation precedes me at this point, and so people sort of know what they're getting into when they sit down with me for a heartfelt interview. So that's helpful, right? Like we can skip all the pleasantries. It's, it's a little more speed dating than anything else. But it's twofold. I treat everyone's story as if it's their story. It is not my story. So if a story is on game day, it is not my story, it is their story. I am just the conduit. I am just the mouthpiece for their story. And then the other thing when it comes to athletes is, one, everybody poops. I swear to God, if you tell yourself that every single time when you're starting out, it humanizes the athletes. Like, oh, they poop also. And just like, again, it's that old thing of like, picture everybody naked, like that was the thing when we were kids, or if you got up in front of a crowd, you were supposed to picture it, which is super
Yeah, don't do that, by the way.
We're not doing that.
We're not happening right now.
And I'm not also thinking like that you should be thinking about people pooping, but this idea that like it humanizes these people that we as a society have placed on a pedestal, right? And then the other element of it, which again feels like it might be a contradiction, is I don't really care. I don't care if you don't like me. You know what I mean? Like, and they may not. There may be athletes who are like, who does this chick think she is? Or I rub them the wrong way, or whatever it is. I'm not for everybody. I don't care if you like me. I hope you do, but if you don't, it really won't affect my day. And so carrying that mindset into a lot of the interactions I have professionally makes a huge difference.
It does.
Because I don't walk away going, God, I hope, did I make a good impression? Did they like me? Like,
I wish I had more of that.
Yeah,
I wish I had totally
it's a great point, and I mean, because you approach it with compassion and integrity and all the things you have, but then you're like, if they don't like it, like I'm gonna move on. And that's
that's an interesting distinction, and I think it's important. I hope that they like the story we tell.
Totally.
I hope that they love the story we tell. I hope that they consider it a legacy piece for the loved one that they lost. I hope that they watch it when they want to remember that person. Like, that's very important to me. And usually then they will like me because they like the work.
Right.
But from a personal standpoint, I care that my husband likes me, my mom likes me, my kids like me, my siblings like me, my colleagues like me, and that's about
That's where it stops, yeah.
Well, this whole room likes you.
Don't care.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I mean, I'm kidding. I care. But like, if you were like, no, I really didn't like her that much, it really.
You won't lose any sleep over there. Yeah, that's hard to do. Like, I think that takes confidence, and that takes like, you're good at your craft, and you approach every situation the same way, and you're like, take or leave it. I mean, it's important. I've kind of gotten to that point too, where frankly, I'm just like, I know what I'm good at, I'm gonna go do it, and if they don't like it, like sometimes I'm like, that's their loss.
But I also think like, I know I'm a good person.
Totally.
Like that's what it is. Like if you didn't like me because you thought I was a bad person, like, and I had like doubts about my own virtues, like there you could down spiral really quickly.
Sure.
But like, I know I'm a good person, I know I'm good at my job, I know that the people in my inner circle love me, and like, that's enough, Now, I've had a lot of success also, right? And I recognize the level that success contributes to my confidence and validation as well. I get all of that. But like, at the end of the day, I'm gonna meet people who don't like me. And if I sat there and like took some inventory at the end of the day of like, gosh, was it this person? Was it that person? Like, what a waste of time.
Totally, I love it. Where is Jen Lada's happy place? Where are you, I mean, maybe going like just personal life, not really on the radio, where are you like finding balance? That because you do a lot, and we all have to like reset. So what is your way to sort of like take a step back, have that moment of relaxation? Maybe it's not a place, maybe it's something that you do, but what is that thing for you that brings you back to earth when you really need it?
Yeah, I take inventory a lot, just personal inventory. I kind of think of it as like a full body scan, like how am I feeling, head to toe sort of thing. And for me, it's when I am in a quiet place. Nature, I love going for walks, going for runs. My schedule demands that I do a lot of multitasking. So I find myself doing the laundry while listening to a podcast, watching a baseball game, while writing, while working out around the horn, like little, I find myself always doing more than one thing. So my happy place is when I can just be, right? I always say, and we forget this, maybe we've never heard it before, but it was so profound when I heard it. We are human beings, not human doings.
Yes, I love that quote.
Yeah, and like,
I didn't
Get over that one.
All right.
Yeah.
and
I
so
love it.
like, when can I just be instead of do? And so being around my kids, they bring me so much happiness and joy. We just got back from spring break and I did nothing. Literally like sat and read a book and floated on a float in the lagoon, and like that was such a nice reset. I do have to be very careful about existing in fight or flight. Football season, just because of the craziness of the schedule, it kind of demands that a little bit. I am prone to disassociate, so I will be walking through an airport and be like, where am I? Like, what city did what color, where, and I'll have to and my therapist told me literally stop and say, it's Tuesday, I'm in Tuscaloosa, I just interviewed Kellen DeBoer, the Crimson Tide play the Auburn Tigers this weekend, whatever, it just lock yourself back in so that you don't get in the habit of just floating away, in order to survive the chaos. So that's something that has really helped me to not become,
I love that.
person.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people sometimes assume obviously you're extroverted and perhaps you're just always on, and I think it's important to be number one, I love that you have a therapist, that's awesome, I do too. And number two is that quiet is really needed. Go out and wherever that space is for you, you have to take a step back and you have to turn it off. If you really want to go out and give 100% everything that you're doing, you have to give 100% that part of your life too. And I think you found that balance. That's hard to do. I call it more of a harmony, right? Our life, we're always connected. Life is never going to slow down. When you find a harmony between those two things, that's when it works out. And it's very subjective. So find your own. But we have to go back to that space that will allow us to move forward. And I think that's been a pretty big theme, for a lot of people that we interview is they're doing so much, but where's your spot? And I love that it's you have that very specific.
Well, and look, I think that one of the things that I use as a barometer is my rottenness. So I'm being serious. When I start to turn rotten, when my interactions start to turn rotten, and I'm like, ew, that was gross. It's usually because I'm overworked, and I need to rest, and I need to power down because I am on empty. And when I'm on empty, I become mean, and I see that in my interactions with my kids or my colleagues, and I know it's happening, but for a long time I didn't know why it was happening. And the older I get, the more I realize, like, no, you're rotten when you're tired. You're rotten when you are worn out, and you need to then plug in, reset, you know, like, I always think about Baymax from that Disney movie, where he's like, low battery. That's kind of how I feel.
That's it. Yeah, your cup has to be overflowing, and if it's empty, it's time to fill it up. So I think that's a good point. As we start to get to the bottom of this and begin wrapping it up, thinking about your journey and I guess how long it's been since you graduated here, and I think it's been now over 20 years. As you're thinking about like 20-year-old Jen, like what would you tell her? Like as you're looking at what's coming, and maybe it's a warning, or maybe it's like some confirmation. But what would be something you'd give junior year? You're starting to think about like things are coming. What are we up to?
So first, I would say, junior Jen, you're not going to marry this guy. So maybe cut your losses. I would also say that the Cubs are going to win the World Series, so put a few bucks down.
Maybe
it's a different time. It was a different time. That was not so easy to do that.
Yeah. Draft Kings.
Yeah.
And it wasn't illegal in Wisconsin like it is there.
Right.
We'll change that.
So I had tough times. I had really challenging times. I wasn't making any money when I was here in Milwaukee, and I couldn't gain any traction. I couldn't get a promotion. I couldn't move up. I was blocked, and I had a baby, and I went through a divorce, and I foreclosed on my house. Like I think about it now, of my mortgage was $1,600 a month, and I couldn't make ends meet, and so the bank was like, we're gonna need that house, and that sucked. It was so like, God, I'm failing at so many things right now. And so I would tell junior Jen, like, all that's gonna happen, and don't change it, but keep moving through it, which is what I ultimately ended up doing. But, if anybody looks at me on television or hears me on the radio or, sees me and thinks like, oh, she's got it so good, like I do, but it wasn't always like this. It was really tough. And there were moments where it was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, man. Like, I should probably take a 9-to-5 steady job at the bank where I'm gonna make twice as much as I'm making in local television, and, be home and able to pick up my kid from daycare at 5 p.m. instead of, shoot, I need a babysitter who can cover me until 11:30, or when I was working in Chicago and I did the midnight show and I needed a babysitter to stay at my house until 1, it was, and I always like think about like, how did I do that? It was absurd. Like the things I was doing just to like get through each day were crazy in retrospect, but I didn't know any different. I didn't know any better other than one foot in front of the other, nose to the grindstone, just keep moving forward. So the advice I would give myself is just like, let it all happen. It all is going to work out. I say the credibility came, the stability came, the financial independence came, the respect came. It took longer than I would have liked, but it all showed up eventually.
Love it. That's amazing. That mic drop right there. One foot in front of the other, everybody. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you to the 707 Hub as well for presenting this as well. We're the Hustling Sideways podcast. Jen, I'm sure, at Jen Lada everywhere, right? Usually ask people where to follow, but you have a very recognizable presence at Jen Lada everywhere. We're the Hustling Sideways podcast as well. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We are on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all of the places.
We're very professional on LinkedIn. It's great.
Very professional, super professional. Thank you guys so much for doing this, and Jen,
keep on hustling. All right. Give it up for Jen.